How many of you have difficult children in your room? How many of you have difficult children at home? Oh yeah, everybody's got difficult children. So I do want to start by saying I have a bias and just let you guys know about it, is that I don't actually think there are difficult children. I think we have difficulties with children. Now, this isn't pretend. I mean, I have my own son and I've been teaching for 20 years. There are children that no doubt when you look at their actions, their behavior, they're different than that girl who's constantly making the room pretty and is always so sweet to you. Like, there's a difference. But what I'm saying is we need to be very careful that we're not focused on the bad boy or the difficult girl. Let's try to get past that as we go along and look at what's the behavior I'm seeing, how can I work on this, how much of this is me. It's going to be a lot of that today, okay? So we'll get in some practical stuff, but I just really want to make it clear we're going through the fundamentals here. If you want a quick, what do I do when my child's crying and I just need the quick answer so they'll be quiet, you can go to Instagram. And we know that will work for 5 seconds and then you'll have the same problem the next day, right? So I just wanted to get that off. That's going to be a little bit more foundational, okay? All right, let's get to it. Let me see if I have this. Okay, I wanted to start off with one of the most, quote, difficult children I'd experienced, with one of them. And I remember back in those days, it was like 15 years ago, I would have, when this happened, I look as this kid's a devil. You know, that's what my feeling was, you know? So basically, I was observing in the classroom, a 3 to 6 classroom, and if you've been in Montessori for a little bit or you're starting to see how we do things in Montessori, when you're observing, you try your hardest not to get involved. I even was sitting on my hands, looking out, and I looked over, and how many of you have like a reading nook or a reading chair or something like that in your classroom? It's so peaceful, it's this wonderful environment, right? And this girl was there, and she was reading in the chair. She was just having a great time reading a book, and I look over, and a boy starts walking over there. I'm like, I wonder what this boy's gonna do. He walks over, and you can think of like a kind of a rocking chair like that in the corner, child size. He walks over, throws her off the chair like strong. Like she fell off, and it looked like she was gonna get hurt. She started crying and bawling. She runs off crying. The boy hops into the chair, picks up the book, and starts reading the book. Like nothing happened. Like it was nothing. And I'd been around children, but this was one of those ones that was just like, what in the heck? So I'm curious, what would you guys do? I mean, not as the observer, I'm not supposed to do anything. If she really got injured, I would have jumped up, right? But she was crying and ran off. What would you do as the teacher? So see how the little girl is doing. Yeah. And I do want to make a distinction, which I'll make even clearer later. I'm going to give some guidance and some tips or whatnot and some fundamental things. But if somebody's literally, like if you caught somebody, they're hitting another child, we're talking about emotions. It's just, we need to stop that behavior, right? So we all know that when it's an action, a physical action, we have to stop that. So let's just get that out of the way. The one thing, I'm not going to go into what we did or the teacher did at that point. We'll go through as we go along. But something interesting as I kind of over the years and look back on it and think about, what did the boy do after he pushed her off the chair? Started reading. Isn't that interesting? So if we're actually stepping back, and what I say is get altitude. So I use the plane as kind of like, if we can get out of the moment when we could get worked up on our own child, other children, whatever. Isn't it interesting that it's not like let's say some 25-year-old, you're walking down the street and he runs up and mugs you. It's not like he's, doing something positive after he mugs you. Like he just robbed you. It's not like or somebody just came up and just punched you in the face and ran off. And that happens with children. They'll punch or hit or. This kid started to read. So it's just something to be interesting about. If he gets an altitude, he wanted that book so badly that he was ready to push her off the chair. But he wanted to read. So we actually want children that want to do things like reading, doing the materials. So when we see a child ripping a material out of another child's hand to use it, or a book, often our focus is on, they're ripping it out of their hand, we need to fix that. But we got to get some altitude at some point and say, but he's actually interested in the pink tower. That's pretty cool. Or he's interested in reading. Now, of course, we do not want a boy or a girl or any human being pushing, shoving, kicking, biting. But I'm just saying we want to always try to get altitude in any moment we have. With the children, with ourselves, with everything. Cool? So that's going to be just a fundamental element of dealing with difficult children. Here's Maria Montessori about discipline. In our system, we obviously have a different concept of discipline. The discipline that we are looking for is active. We do not believe that one is disciplined only when he is artificially made as silent as a mute and as motionless as a paralytic. Such a one is not disciplined, but annihilated. So I want you to be thinking about, this is about, quote, difficult children, but what about that child who's so timid in your room that will do anything you ask of them? They never cause any trouble. They do everything the teacher wants, everything their friends want. They never cause trouble. They're never difficult. Is there a problem with that child that's just as significant, but we're not seeing it? Because that child's not difficult. Yeah? So discipline is really, at the end of the day, it's self-discipline. We need to help children become self-disciplined, which could be talking up if somebody hurts you. You know? It's not just not hurting somebody, it's when you get hurt, you have the discipline enough to say, I don't like that. You know? So it's just a broader vision of discipline, a broader vision of thinking about this whole topic of difficult children. Yeah? Maria Montessori could get altitude because I think she had a way in which she could see the man or the woman in the child. How many of you read Maria Montessori's works? Okay, I recommend you dig into the ones. You know, like I'll give you one at the end, just a simple one. It's a really thin one. Oh yeah, it's right here. Maria Montessori speaks to parents. So there's no excuse for you not to read a book this size, right? It's so thin. And it's a simple one. But she has a way in which she talks about children as if she already sees this wonderful human being. That's the altitude I'm talking about. Right? These children are working on themselves. So I want to be thinking about that 3-year-old who's tossing crap all over the room. We want to think about that development. We're working on this now. It's not just about tossing in the moment, but when he's 30. Is what I'm going to do in the moment for this, quote, difficult child helpful long range, or is it just to get him to stop right now? You know? All right, so gain altitude is going to be on our agenda. So these are the things that we're going to go through. Foundation. What's about our foundation with Montessori that helps to deal with, quote, difficult children? 2 difficult practices. So somebody was in here earlier, and I think on the big talk, somebody was saying like, oh, I feel joy every day. And somebody was like, saw the spilled water, and that's like joyous. How many of you have reached the level where that's joyous when you see spilled water all over the floor? No? Maybe somebody? Okay. But I say 2 difficult practices because our work with the children can be, quote, difficult, depending on where we're at. You know? And then let's go live examples, Q&A, pushback. We're not going to have a Q&A pushback at the end. It's just going to be going back and forth. Just want to hear what's going on with you guys, right? And then we will wrap up with closing recommendations and how you can contact me if you want and so forth, okay? So we're going to hop right into things. Question for you. What does a difficult child look like to you? What are they actually maybe in your room? Or a child that is having difficulties? Yeah. Yeah, interrupting other. The child's gloriously involved with the material and the child just comes up and swats the work. Or is in their ear, just jibber-jabbering, jibber-jabbering. Yep.
Wander the classroom.
Yeah, what they're supposed to be eating and they're falling off their chair, they're going and saying, what do you have for lunch across the room? Right? Now, is that a difficult child or is that a child that we have difficulties with? You know, so think, I'm trying to think about it like that. Did you want to add something on the table in the back?
I was going to say hitting,
Pushing, biting. Yep.
Swearing.
Swearing can be difficult, right? Yep. Looking for negative attention, yeah. So some of this stuff, swearing, negative attention, where are they getting that from? maybe reinforced, maybe at home. So there's so much going on, right? So we're going to deal with what we can deal with and see how things go, yeah? All right, gain altitude. So we had that boy pushes the girl off the chair, right? Now in this case, again, if a boy did that, for me, if this were my classroom, he'd be holding my hand for a lot of that day. And I don't know what happens the next day. We'll see how things go. But that day, I'd say, oh, I think you need to hold my hand. But as we'll see later, the first thing after you stop, if he's still hitting or pushing, we're going to get into acknowledging emotions. He actually wanted to read, which is almost never in any class, any home, is it going to be clear to that boy that somebody sees that I really just wanted to read. And we'll talk about that a little bit later. And then the girl. In this case, to get altitude, we want children who are able to stand up for themselves, right? How many times are you on the playground or possibly in the room and you're the one breaking up problems? It's constant, right? We want them to deal with their own issues. So you might go over to that girl and we might talk to her about, why don't you, let's go talk and tell so-and-so how you felt about that or what you thought, you know? So we're getting everybody involved, right? But let's get some altitude. There's that girl with her water, just to give a sense. I'm going to give you a scenario. Well, actually, think about this. Can you remember in the last few months just a day that was on fire? It was so good. It's like one of your favorite days, whether at work, home life, everything. It just like everything came together and you felt like you're on top of the world. You know that day? On days like that, if something small happens, like you threw something in the garbage and it slipped out, would you be like, oh, damn it, I missed the garbage again? Or would it be like you'd skip over and go, woo, and you would throw it in because you're so high, you know, you're feeling good. I would say if you saw that girl spill water on that high day when everything's just like life, nothing could bother me. It's like, oh, you spilled water, let's go clean that up. You're high. And then on a day when you didn't get sleep, it's the 10th time she spilled water. You go over there and you're just like, what the, I mean, again? So I want to ask you, think about those two scenarios. The girl was the same. The spilling was the same. Yet our reaction is different. So again, get altitude. And not just gain altitude on the situation, but on ourselves. That's my son, Ragnar. Super cute there, but he can be a handful at different times, right? Now, I'm going to tell you a story that's not very, it's half positive, half negative on me. But generally, I think I'm pretty good. Like I've reached a stage where I feel pretty good, but every now and again, something will pop up in me. Does it ever happen in the classroom? Everything's going well, and then something, you're just like, where did that come from? You ever have that? So I was at home, and this is about gaining altitude. I was walking by his room, and I had not had a lot of sleep the night before. I think I was up working or something. And I walked by, and you know what? Let me go back. I'm going to save that story. I apologize. I kind of like set it up because I want to tell you one that's going to be even rougher than this. Okay. I'll tell you the story about him later, but I'm going to tell you this story about chicken fingers instead. Are you guys okay with that? Okay. So when I was in college, it was in LA, so prices were very high for rent. So we had 5 guys in a 2-bedroom apartment. Okay? And one guy was having some difficulties with all sorts of things. He would sleep till 11 o'clock, noon, completely dark in his room. We're out there having fun, and he just was having, who knows what was going on with this guy's life at the time. So one day, we're all out there having fun, and he's sleeping in his room, and all of a sudden the door opens, and he walks out to the kitchen. We're like, oh, Jason's up. He's walking out to the kitchen, and we keep doing our thing. He goes and walks in the kitchen, opens the freezer. Now, excuse my language. It's not me saying this, but I'm just repeating what he said. We hear from the kitchen, because we're looking, whose fucking chicken fingers are these? So now, I think in this room, are there any men in this room? They're all women. Generally speaking, I'm going to speak on a generality here, but generally speaking, when that happens, we do not go, oh, are you upset about something? You know, we don't go, oh, did I take too much room in the freezer? So I guess he was upset because there wasn't room, and he had like a Costco-sized chicken. Somebody but put Costco-sized chicken fingers in there. So of course, as young, like old teenage guys, again, it's a generality. There's some guys that are more sophisticated than we were at this stage, but we start picking at him, like, "Oh, are you upset in there?" This type of thing. So we're egging him on. He's yelled at one of my friends with glasses, like, "What are you talking about, 4 eyes?" It just became this battle. And then something really triggered him. I don't remember what it was, but something really triggered him. He walks off to the room. We're kind of chuckling like, "Oh, this guy." And out of nowhere, we're sitting on the couch, and a full-size vacuum comes around the corner, flying in the air, almost hit my buddy right in the face. So that was very close to being something very violent. And at some other time, it got pretty bad, even worse than that. So the moral of this story, the moral is, it's not about the chicken fingers. So it really stayed with me because in that moment, this guy, what did he think the problem was? Chicken. There wasn't space in the freezer. Chicken fingers. Now, to some sliver of extent, it's true. There wasn't space. He could have made, but it's not really about the chicken fingers. So as we go through today, I just want to be thinking about these moments. Is it really about the moment that we're dealing with? Is it about the thing? Or is it about how we're approaching it, or is it about something deeper inside? Yeah? So generally, it's not about the chicken fingers. Cool? And remember, Q&A pushback, you can always push back and be like, when we start dealing with some real kid examples, "No, I don't agree." Do it. Cool? Okay. And I'll get back to my son later. So prep, gain altitude on the situation and on oneself, right? Here's Maria Montessori. The real preparation for education is a study of one's self. How many of you are new to Montessori? Okay. So when you're new, if you went to a different school, let's say a traditional 5th grade class, they're going to hand you a curriculum and be like, "Hey, you got to study this because this is what you got to teach the kids. Learn this curriculum and teach it." That's what's important. And in Montessori, often in our trainings, we're learning about materials, right? Because materials are very important. How many days do we spend learning about materials versus working on ourselves? Well, so you work on yourself every day, but in your training, is there any guidance on how to deal with the issues that are surely going to come up? Sometimes, I had an amazing trainer, but nowhere near the amount of work than materials, right? Like the intricacies, you hold this one this way, like so much. But Maria Montessori is saying the real preparation of education is the study of oneself. So we don't do a lot of the work that might be needed, okay? And it's ongoing, right? So a lot of the time, the work that we need to be doing is on ourselves, not necessarily on the child. Got it? Cool. And then she was just kind of going back to Socrates and know thyself. She was a big fan of the ancients and just thinking about that. So when I say gain altitude, let's see what is the situation? What's going on here? Long range, and then myself. How am I feeling right now in the moment? Okay, our foundation. Montessori, I'm going to put up 2 foundations. There could be more. There could be, you might have ideas, but these are the 2 that I'm going to go through. And here's my son. And this is the story I was going to tell you about my son, okay? So I'm walking by his room. I didn't get a lot of sleep. And I've been in Montessori for, over almost 20 years, in some respects related to Montessori. And I'm walking by, and I see him climbing his dresser. Okay, now the dresser is attached to the wall, so he's not going to fall and hurt himself, so I wasn't worried. It was more of, I had told him before not to climb on the dresser. Those handles could break. My wife had told him not to climb the dresser. But there's Ragnar climbing the dresser. So on a good day, who knows what I would have done. On this day, what would your reaction be? Yeah, it's like, ah! Yeah, that's it. Just get down. Okay? It's like, get your ass down. Somehow, I was able to gain a little bit of Zen, and but I had the emotion, that's what I'm saying, so it's still there. Something inside of me is like, get your ass down. Chill. He couldn't see me, so I just stopped, and I observed. I said, I know we need to observe these children. So I'm looking, And I see he's almost at the top. He gets to the top and he goes, and he's looking at the things on the top so he can see from that angle. Because he had never been up here looking down. All of us, that's a daily. We don't even think about it. It's a daily. But I had observed and stopped to take a moment to observe, and that's what he was doing. On a side note, by the way, it just hit me. You guys ever walking around the supermarket, if you have a young child and they're by like the milk section, they'll go, oh, he's peeking out. Have you ever seen that? Yeah, because some of you are like, why? Wait, what do you mean? Because they must make those milk places where they're pushing the milks in the other side, they must make them at an angle so adults can't see them back there doing stuff. But the kids can see them. So it's so funny when this happens now. So that's what I'm talking about, that like it's a different perspective. So I saw it. Now, does that mean that he can break things in the house? The handles on the dresser? No. So what I did was I went over to Ragnar and I said, I can see you wanted to get up to the top. First of all, he scattered really quickly down once he saw me coming in the room. I said, I can see you want to get up there and see the things there, but we can't climb up. And I showed him how the handles can bend. And then it hit me that I had this little container, let me see, like a little Lego box. Then we didn't have Legos in it, but just a box for a couple of things. And I said, you know what, Ragnar? Let me bring that over. And I slid it over so that and I put it by the dresser. I said, if you ever want to go see the top, like we can see the top, use this little stool thing. And he got right up and he started looking at the top. And he was so satisfied. But so this difficult child just became a child who's curious. He was observing. But I couldn't see it. I couldn't see it, and Maria Montessori would tell me why. It's because we must open our eyes. She's saying we must open our eyes. So sometimes we're not actually seeing the children. I'm curious with this story, has this ever happened to you, something like that? Obviously not the exact thing. Does anybody else have a story that hit them like that when you were about to act in a way that would not have been good and the whole situation got turned around because you were able to kind of get some altitude? Yeah, go for it.
I go to, I might cry. Some kids were in the bathroom and they were spreading dirt on the floor. And I was like handfuls of stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And then they said, we're feeding the ants.
Oh, you see? You see?
I say,
Yeah. Now just think, there's two different things, and we'll talk about these. Yeah, feeding the ants. She's feeding the ants the dirt. So we'll talk about these two different ways, but like the old school approach, you would never know what those kids were doing because you would have just been like, what the hell are you doing in here? That's the old school. The new school approach is the exact opposite. So you're sitting on the floor going, oh, there's ants here. Let's play in the mud and throw mud on the walls. And you go the whole other way and forget that we still can't have mud all over the bathroom floors. So we'll see how these kind of, this pendulum, we need to be objective. We need to get some observation, learn about children, and not fall to one or the other. In your case, it's like, oh yeah, now you understand what they're doing. And it is so cute. They're trying to feed the ants. Oh, I see what you guys are doing. Now let's clean this up, or whatever the next step is. So it's a balance as we go through. So observation is going to be huge. You guys have observation windows in your classroom? No? Yes? How do parents see what's going on in the classroom? They don't, like that video? Oh, you don't. It's important that parents can see whatever way you do it, whether they come in, observe, so forth, it's important. But observation, one of the ways I've been able over the years to see what works with children, what doesn't work, is that I just wasn't only in my own classroom. I also didn't just observe hundreds of schools. I had people come and observe my classroom and tell me things that might have been going wrong, and might tell me everything you see, positive, negative, give it to me. So what I'm saying is observe more. This is 6-month-old Ruby. She's 6 months old. Maybe you don't even work with infants. It doesn't matter. Let's take a look at what's happening with Ruby on this floor and see if we can learn anything by observing a child. Okay, so how many of you wanted to push the thing towards her? Oh, that's it? The rest of you are good. That's great. Well, I wondered, this video is actually 3 times the length, so I wonder if you had watched the whole thing, would you be able to? No. Funny enough, we had a few guys in the classroom, not the class, whatever this happens to be, in the morning, and he's all like, oh, I actually would have pulled it back farther. You can see, that's like a typical dad comment, right? So the strange thing is, did she, like if we're actually just opening our eyes, did she give us any sign that she needed help? None. Yet we want to push it towards her, or the few of us want to push it towards her. So what are we doing? We're not really observing. Montessori had this to say: one can pass quite close to the child and yet not see him. Kind of wild, because we're there, we're looking at her, she's not, but so there's what I'm getting at it again, there's something deep in us in different ways, we're all unique human beings, that we got to work on. There's obstacles that we have in our path. Montessori talks a lot about obstacles in the child's path that we're putting there. We have obstacles in our own path that we're tripping over, right? So do some observations, get out there, observe in other classrooms. I was given an example, I think this morning, about, I had a teacher she had some difficulties with some difficult children that would like congregate in this one area of the classroom. Do you have like that secret little area where the kids are causing trouble? You know? So she had, you can imagine a room, it's going down, and there's like a little corner that was like kind of, you couldn't quite see it unless you went all the way over there. And I was walking through with this teacher, and then a trainer was walking through, and then this teacher's telling the trainer, I'm having trouble, and the trainer just said this: that corner right there of this area, could you just put a mirror up in the corner so you could see that area? So simple. We're going to be talking about deep stuff today, but the ability to do the deep observation allows you to do the simplistic stuff. You can't get simplistic answers unless you've got this foundation of solidness, right? That trainer could see she'd seen many classrooms. She'd also been in class, taught herself. Get out there, be a trainer. I don't mean like you got to go train people, but do what trainers do. Go observe classrooms. Have somebody come to your classroom, you know? Don't get stuck in your own little hole, right? All right, so observation. I'm going to go through this quickly because we got it in the morning, but this was basically that long passage about the girl who was so intent using the wooden cylinders. Was everybody in the morning? Big one. Okay, so she's working on those cylinders. She's really working it. Let me see what the book is, Child in the Family. Let me get this one for you. I'm going to read the part instead of reading the whole thing again. You know what, let me just do it because I think it's going to be needed and powerful. So, yet before me, a 4-year-old girl with every indication of the deepest attention was putting cylinders of various dimensions into a wooden frame. She put them in with the greatest care, and when there were none left, she took them out in order to put them right back in and continued in this fashion, seemingly without end. I began to read a story. When she had repeated her little task more than 14 times, I sat down at the piano and invited the other children to sing. How many of you know how many times the child did the cylinders? You guys count that closely? Maria, she was such a scientist. If you read her work, that girl, she had so much data, it's incredible. Anyways, the little girl continued her useless labor without moving, useless to an adult's perspective, by the way, without raising her eyes, completely oblivious to everything that went on around her. All at once, she stopped, got up, smiling and content, her eyes shining. She seemed happy, rested, and smiling as children do when they awake to the beneficent sun. From that time on, I observed these same manifestations many more times. That was Maria Montessori's like aha moment. This is like the method being developed. When the children had completed an absorbing bit of work, they appeared rested and deeply pleased. It almost seemed as if a road had opened up within their souls that led to all their latent powers. Revealing the better part of themselves, they exhibited great affability to everyone, put themselves out to help others, and seemed full of goodwill. Then it would happen that one of them would quietly approach the teacher and whisper to her, as if confiding a great secret, "I'm a good boy." Right? Yeah. That was a good timing. So, an absorbing bit of work. All that happened to bring about this contentment was an absorbing bit of work. Now, we don't know what that work is. It could be anything. In this case, it's cylinders or something else he's working on. Could be cutting oranges. Could be washing the windows. Who knows? Those of you who have children, grandchildren, you know when they're engaged in some meaningful work, whether it's making something on the stove or it's in a classroom doing some math work, are they, quote, difficult in that moment? They're absorbed. They're engaged. So we know that that work, there's a key there. So when I say our foundation, we have to be observing, and we got to find where their work is, this absorbing bit of work. That's the foundation of any, quote, good behavior with a child. So that's our foundation. Now we're going to get into the practices. Now these are the two, I say difficult practices because it kind of depends on where you're at. By the way, with an absorbing bit of work, have you guys found it difficult to get a difficult child to do work? Yeah? Can somebody give me an example of that? I'm curious. Like live right now with you in the classroom, not doing work. Somebody go for it, yeah. Yeah, go for it. Okay, so floating around the room. Yeah. How old is the child? Okay, a 5-year-old. How many of you have what you're calling a floater or a wanderer? A wanderer? I have an episode on this. I think it's called The Wandering Child, Montessori Wandering Child or something, but it might be check out the podcast episode on this. I think it's pretty good. So one thing to think about, is there any work that he enjoys? Daycare work.
Yeah.
What's daycare work?
So that's during daycare hours.
Hmm?
Like actual toys, like not Montessori material.
Yeah.
What you would consider a toy at home.
Okay. Now, some of you are old school, some of you are new, some of you are in the middle, so I'm sure you guys have tried different things and so forth. I'm just going to give a couple quick things here. If we think about observation before we get to these practices, observation and an engaging bit of work or an absorbing bit of work. We're observing that they're interested in some materials, but they're daycare materials. So, is there any work in the classroom that's similar in some of the regards? This morning, somebody was raising that, what do we do with all these kids that are just watching television all day? Because they come in the class, do they really want to work with the cylinders now? Are the cylinders outdated? Because children they want this flashy stuff. And the person said, like Tom and Jerry or some cartoon. Well, I think about this as we don't want to reject what they're getting at home. If a child's excited about some daycare toy, it's not like, put that down, do the real work. Or Tom and Jerry at home. No, those are cartoons. You shouldn't be watching them. We don't want a 3-year-old watching Tom and Jerry. That's not a positive thing. If you're curious, you don't know, definitely let me know. But if a boy comes in the class and he's like, I'm Tom and you're Jerry, and they're running around. Let me ask you this. What is Tom? Literally, what is he? He's a cat. Do we have parts of a cat? No, then get it. Get it. Order it from one of these 5 million Montessori material makers these days. Somebody's got parts of a cat, and if not, make it. What is it? They're out there, yeah. One of those material makers make the cat. And then Jerry's a mouse. You know what I'm saying? So there are things. And I can tell you this much. I know this is kind of a little bit crazy, but are there animals near you that you don't like having around? Are there mice near you? Or you guys get rid of them real quick? I know this sounds crazy, but we have a little schoolhouse so we can do crazy things. We're not, If there's a mouse and you can show them, hey, this is a mouse that runs around, and it's okay to show real life things. You know what I'm saying? Like, hey, I can't wait to tell you what happened this morning, but I came into school early and there was a mouse just lying there. I know, so some of you, no. If you noticed that story before, it's like, hey, this happened. It's very factual. It's not scary or look at this disgusting rat I found. No, it's just, here's a rat. So what I'm saying is these difficult children, engage them in something. I can guarantee you, if you do with a lot of the children, I'm not saying all of them, but you know the ones that need this. If you got a rat or an ant, something like that, I want to show you. And then a week later you order from Montessori materials, Nina's, whatever, parts of a something, dude, that kid is going to be engaged. The most difficult child you have is going to be engaged. You know? So we got to be creative. Observe which children would like that and which children are like, my toddler teacher, don't mess around with rats around that kid, at least right now. You know? Okay, so 2 difficult practices. This is freedom within limits. I'm going to be talking about freedom within limits, but Jackson is like this perfection Montessori child. And I'm going to show it to you. We can think about what's happening in his environment that allows for this child to just be so free. And then we can think of all the things that probably led up to it, because a lot of work goes into this. So this freedom within limits is one of the difficult actions that we need to be doing with children. All right, so what comes to mind with this? Anything? I know we're talking about difficult children, so anything in relation to your, quote, difficult children?
He was engaged with the prepared environment.
He was engaged with the prepared environment, so somebody did a good job with the prepared environment here, right? Do you think there probably were some, quote, difficult children somewhere running around that? Yeah, we're only seeing Jackson right now. And Jackson probably has his off day too, right? Anything else? Yep. Yeah, and I think I'm going to get to you in a moment in the back. What she said about the environment, how many of you, the children, are allowed to run outside like that in that big environment at your school? No. I mean, in most states, this is in Canada. I don't even know if it's legal there, but in most states, that's illegal. So, yeah, go for it.
Also, I was wondering, because it seems like he's leaving the classrooms.
Yes. Did you see that in and out of different classrooms? So that's also illegal. So I want to let you guys know that some of the challenges that you have with, quote, difficult children, ultimately, I mean, I don't want to say it's not your fault, because we have to take the responsibility that we have to take, but we have limitations set on us. That environment is incredible. In most states I visit, half the stuff is illegal. They're preparing food for each other, which in some places is now you can't do. I mean, it's just, there's so many restrictions on us. So a lot of the, quote, difficult children are a problem. They're a product of their environment now. But what can we do to change? Yeah. Yep, yeah, you.
I just noticed that before he started his day, he was walking to school in fresh air and exercise and just
Yep.
taking that time to just be.
To be. I love how you put the to just be too. It's crazy that you just saying that. It just reminds me how many kids are picked up at the doorstep on the way out of their house, plopped in the car, picked up out of the car, plopped into the classroom. The only place they're walking is in our classrooms. And in the outdoor, I mean, it really is crazy. I remember my own son, I didn't quite fully get it until my son, when he would, like a baby's crying, there was never a time if he was crying inside where I took him outside where he didn't stop crying. Not once. So that fresh air, it's so important. So to the extent that you can, we think about they've got to learn their math. They got to go on a walk. If you can't do it, talk to your head of school and plan some trips where you can figure out how to walk somewhere. But get out. So I love that you said that. Yeah. And then this, you can see all these, I just use this as an example with the pencils. In some environments, that would be insanely too many pencils. But for them, they've got so many children going back and forth, it might work. So freedom within limits looks different for each of us as we go, but you need to offer freedom within limits. It's a guidance of Montessori saying you offer freedom. Montessori talks about freedom all the time. But we need to be the ones experimenting. How much freedom does this child get? I know when I was doing relatively traditional school, we had the most difficult fourth grader. He was cursing. He was saying inappropriate stuff to the girls. He wouldn't do his work. Half of that's because of traditional school, no doubt. But I remember I started offering. I was like, you know what? You don't have to do the work that everybody has to do. Why don't you choose out of these two? It was crazy. It was like a new child had grown because he could choose something. So what choices can we offer these children that are throwing stuff around in the classroom? Even the child is throwing stuff around. You know what? It looks like you really like to throw stuff around. You know what? Why don't we take a walk outside? And you call over an assistant if you have one. If not, then do it at snack time and start throwing crap outside. The difficulty becomes fun. Get a workout out there during the day. That's what I do. I go out and run around with the kids. Because where else are we going to find the time? That's what I do. I say difficult because some of these practices, or these two, they can be very challenging for us. So this one I want to talk about. And when I talk about it, tends to be difficult, particularly for us Montessori people. Okay? We went from the anger character. You guys know Inside Out? Okay, so that was the anger character. What I just went to here is beyond anger, it's hate. Okay? How many of you allow hate in your classroom? Can I get a show of hands? How many of you allow hate in your classroom? 0. Maybe like a half hate, a little bit of hate. Like a little. So good. So you ask, I like this. That's what the Q&A push, but it's like, like somebody says you allow hate. What do you mean? Like punching somebody, yelling at them? What does hate mean? So hate is an emotion. I asked how many of you allow hate in your classroom? But even now when I say explicitly it's an emotion, how many of you allow hate in your classroom?
Well, if you don't allow it, is. So it's gonna
Oh.
happen whether you allow it or not.
Can you think of a way in which you could be pushing away hate in your classroom? The feeling of hate. Let me give you the example, then we'll talk about it, okay? This is by a man named Haim Ginott. Oh, I got the wrong book. But Haim Ginott, and it's called Between Parent and Child, but it's for anybody with children that works with children. Why do children lie? Sometimes they lie because they are not allowed to tell the truth. 4-year-old Willie stormed into the living room, angry, and complained to his mother, "I hate Grandma." His mother, horrified, answered, "No, you don't. You love Grandma. In this home, we don't hate. Besides, she gives you presents and takes you places. How can you even say such a horrible thing?" But Willie insisted, "No, I hate her. I hate her. I don't want to see her anymore." His mother, and this is 1970s, so just bear with me. His mother, now really upset, decided to use a more drastic educational method. She spanked Willie. I would say the equivalent today is that, no, we don't have hate in this class. We're kind to everybody. That's the kind of emotional spanking, is what I would say. You can push back, but that's what I would say today. Willie, not wanting to be punished, changed his tune. "I really love Grandma, Mommy." How did Mommy respond? She hugged and kissed Willie and praised him for being such a good boy, right? What did little Willie learn? It's dangerous to tell the truth, to share your true feelings with your mom. When you're truthful, you get punished. You get hit, or you get yelled at, or you get a lecture about being kind. When you lie, you get, what's the opposite of hate? Love. You get love when you lie. Truth hurts. Stay away from it. Mommy loves little liars. Mommy likes to hear only pleasant truths. Tell her only what she wants to hear, not how you really feel, right? Now, what could Willie's mother have answered if she wanted to teach Willie to tell the truth? She would have acknowledged his upset. "Oh, you no longer love Grandma? Would you like to tell me what Grandma did that made you so angry, made you feel that way?" He may have answered, "She brought a present for the baby, not for me." So maybe a younger sibling. Grandma brought a present and didn't bring him one. And in his words at that point, the strongest feeling he could imagine in his words at that point is hate. That's how he's expressing what he felt. So if you push that away, you're pushing away how he felt. Right? Okay, so anybody have some pushback that, no, I still don't feel like we should allow that emotion?
Can't you just reword that emotion? You're saying he doesn't hate, he just didn't like what happened.
Yeah, so you could say something like, "Oh, you're really upset with Grandma? Tell me more." I think that's perfect because you're helping them to use the language. All I'm saying is don't push away what he used. You know? Yeah.
Also, I think example.
Yeah, at the end. So it's possible once he communicates that with you. So you acknowledge the emotion. Often when you acknowledge an emotion, "Oh, you're really upset." They're like, "Oh, yeah." And then you go, "Can you tell me more?" Or you say something. And then they'll start communicating. A lot of times, think about teenagers today that don't talk to their parents. Why is that? Because their parents don't often listen. They want to jabber at them. "Oh, you should do this. You should do that." Even a teenage girl who tells her mom or dad, I feel ugly." What does mom or dad say? "Oh, you feel ugly?" No. What do they say? "You're beautiful." And we all know somebody can tell you that a million times, but if we don't believe it ourselves, it's worthless. Yeah.
I was just going to say, and I think a lot of us, like you said before, are trained in the material. So if we're observing something and we see a person or what they may maybe mean to guide them in, we have more practice with that. But a lot of us don't have practice with observing or hearing something and then trying to get to the bottom of it to say, what's really going on here? Because for the child, they can't identify that emotion. As adults, we have a hard time sometimes identifying our emotion. Like you said with, okay, I'm mad now about the dresser, and so maybe I'm just going to react in that moment instead of like stepping back and saying, okay, now I'm mad because it's the 10th time the person has climbed the dresser. What's the motivation behind that activity? And for the child, if they are saying they hate, or like often in our classroom, this will be a big one, maybe in your guys too, they'll be, you know, the biggest, most powerful thing sometimes kids can say will be, I'm not going to be your friend.
Yep.
You're not coming to my
Yep.
birthday. You're not coming to my birthday, you know. And do they really, no, they're just looking for some type of locus control because they think, you know, they've been wronged in some way or they want something, right?
Yeah.
You're not my friend because you played with someone else.
Yeah,
For
so
them, it's just black and white.
so I think what's important to get at here is when I say acknowledge emotions, let me see what's up here next too. I don't mean that we have to become the therapist. So that's what we have to be careful with, because Maria Montessori has this quote that's like, it hit me hard. It's like, a child without a secret becomes an adult without personality. Think about that. A child without a secret becomes an adult without personality. We parents, we want to know what's going on in there. And Montessori talks about this time and time again. We can't know everything of what's happening inside the child. But we can see if a child is raging or saying, I'm not going to be your friend anymore, and she comes up to you and says, I'm not going to be her friend anymore. We can see that, oh, you're upset with her? We can see that much. We don't know the deep stuff going on. We don't know if it is deep or just that she took one of the toys. We don't know. But we can acknowledge what we see. Or you might have seen it. She comes up and says, I'm not your friend because you just took that from me. It doesn't have to be an emotion. You could say, oh, she just took that from you. It doesn't even have to be an emotion. Oh, they just want to acknowledge what's happening. So
That's why I loved what you said, pointed that out. We do that a lot in our classroom about the person also who might have the pencil or whatever is taken from
Yeah.
them, for them to be able to say how they felt about it, even though it seems like maybe a lot right at that moment. It's not really, because the whole dynamic changes when that child has a voice and says, as an opinion, I didn't like that. And so it's like giving voice to people as well in that moment, and it really carries a lot of weight between the children.
yeah.
Really, between them and the peers.
Yeah, and you're modeling this too. Every time you acknowledge emotions, they're seeing what you're doing. The one thing I would say is be careful in a Montessori class, and Maria Montessori talks a lot about this, is that we want to be careful about how much we're, quote, correcting. If a child is biting another child, we are correcting. We're getting that child away from the other one. If a child does something that you don't think is really the sweetest or kindest thing, do a grace and courtesy lesson the next day. You don't always have to come in and break things up and make things peaceful. Again, if somebody's being outrageous to another person, spitting in their face, screaming at them, pushing them, obviously that's when you step in. But be careful that we're just not becoming like the peacekeeper of all times. Nobody likes somebody over their shoulder like the littlest thing, you know? I saw this with some boys at our little schoolhouse. You know, they're trying to figure out how far can I go with like wrestling and so forth. I know at normal schools you got to be very careful because, you know, any kind of physical contact, but a lot of that is like learning. What can we do? If a child says stop, that means stop. But if kids are like just doing bumping into each other, that's what children do. That's what guys do sometimes. That's what girls do. Who knows? So we got to be careful, you know? So here's Haim Ganat. It takes great wisdom to realize that all feelings are legitimate. The positive, the negative, and the ambivalent. We need to learn this. All of the feelings, good, bad. How about envy? Any of you like to feel envy? Who just loves to feel envy? Nobody. Right, but I once spoke with this lady. She was like 90 years old. She was wonderful to me. She said, you know what? I think I was telling her, I was like, oh, I hate this. And she said, you know what? I mean, I don't love it, but when it happens, I don't push it away because you know what I realize with envy? It tells you something. What does it tell you? You want something. Now you have to do the work to figure out, is it a positive thing or a bad thing? But it does tell you something. So when we push our emotions away, we don't get that information, we don't get that insight, and it just gets pushed. So let's not push away our children's emotions, right? Emotions do not equal actions. Some people say, like with the hate, you can't just run up. I'll give you two examples. Well, actually, the child here is a great example. You can't push somebody off the chair because you want the book. Basketball coaches, lots of different coaches, run on the court and start throwing chairs. That's completely inappropriate. Now, is his rage at the referee valid? Valid in the sense that he can feel it, but you can't act on it. So I don't mix up this acknowledge emotions with allowing ridiculousness in the classroom. I'm not saying that. How about this one? Now, what's weird about this is I'm not political in any, I mean, I have political beliefs, but I don't like either side, guys, to be honest with you. I mean, this is not political. This is just human being we're talking about. And I'm sure I could find something on the other side just as ridiculous as yelling. I hate Taylor Swift, that's capitalized with an exclamation point. That would be like if I'm here and I just walk, I hate you. It's like, how old are you, dude? You know, so that's not, I mean, he has an emotion. I'm not even sure if it's real. Like, I don't know if he's sitting at home really feeling rage towards Taylor. I just don't know. I don't think anybody, it's very hard to find out what's inside other people's heads at times. But this type of lashing out, this is not emotion, this is an action. He's taking action. It's like if a child ran up to you, spit in your face. I hate you, and spit in your face. We can acknowledge the emotion, but we also need to do something about that action. That's inappropriate, right? So I just want to make that distinction. And again, this is not political. I'm not left or right, I gotta tell you. Here's my son doing all sorts of actions that are problematic. Oh, I don't have the other side. I don't know where. Let me see if it's somewhere else. Hold on. I'm going to say these are difficult. Oh, yeah, it's right here. So I'll give you an example. How many of you have this happen sometimes? How many of you are 3 to 6 teachers? Okay, so a lot. How many of you are toddler teachers? Okay, how many of you are above elementary and beyond? Okay, so not very. So we'll all have this little form of this, but say this little girl, I was down in the hall and I saw my wife, the way she was talking to this girl. But this girl walked in the classroom. She had been doing it the last few days. She had a toy in her hand. I want to bring this in the classroom. How many of you have that happen? Right? And it can become a battle. So she started crying, I want to bring this in the classroom. And of course, you know, parents are very smart. They don't want to deal with it in the car, right? Now that's a problem with parents, and that's a whole nother issue. I do a whole, I don't even know where I put the thing. I do a whole talk on parent communication, because that's a whole separate issue, right? But let's say we just have to accept that the parents are like, they just push them in, you know? So she comes in with a toy. What I'm saying is, what's the first thing? She has this toy. You've told her before she can't have toys in the class, and we don't have it. You've been super kind. What's the first thing we do when she comes to the door with a toy and starts crying about wanting to bring it in the classroom? Yeah. See, but we got to put it away. We immediately put it away. Immediately put it away. I'm just trying to think of a good analogy with us. Like, I come home, and my wife's like, oh, look at this cool thing. I'm put it away. What would that be like? So we need to get in their shoes. First thing we need to do is like, oh, you've got a toy you want to bring in the classroom. Is that so hard? Is that so hard? So at the least, she's going to feel like, oh, this person gets me. Now, do we go the other pendulum, like in the 60s or throughout most of history, it would have been like, put that thing back. That's what most of human history, that's how we treated children. Now we're so sophisticated. Now it's like, oh, you want to bring the toy in the classroom? Come right in. Let's just sit on the ground and throw toys around. Like, we've gone the whole other way. You know? So what I'm saying is, acknowledge emotions, and then, so you go, oh, you wanted to bring that toy? I can see you're so upset. Let's put that toy right here, and oh, I have something I wanted to show you. And then you move off. And you guys have done this. Now, sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. And sometimes it doesn't. Sometimes people need to cry. Sometimes adults need to cry. Sometimes she needs to cry. And often in a Montessori classroom, another child walks by to console. And sometimes nobody wants to console because they're busy working right now. And that's okay. She can cry a little bit, and then she learns to self-soothe. And it's not, the teacher's not being mean. So this is the type of action, but just that acknowledge emotions first. Yes?
We had this exact same thing. She gave her a choice between, because it was the first time with this person. You can put it in this chair outside on our deck where you could put it in your backpack. And so she took her outside and they put it in the chair, and she loved it. She loved having it. It wasn't in the classroom.
It's her space.
It happened again, and all I had to say was, oh, you brought another friend
There you go.
Opened the door, and she went outside, put it in the chair, came back in, and was super happy.
There you go. And I think, you coming in as a new teacher and seeing that, that's the beauty of Montessori.
Yeah.
That's the beauty of having a classroom where that child has things to do. Because I can tell you when you don't have things to do, so that's a sign that something's going right in that classroom. Because otherwise they're just going to be so attached to this thing, So you do your little strategies like this to make it work, but the first thing is just acknowledge that they're upset, You guys ever feel like that? So for those days where you just you don't have the bandwidth to even acknowledge emotions, those days, here's Magda Gerber. If you haven't read her, definitely read her. And mom in the back, Magda Gerber for 0 to 3 is like gold. So I'm telling you. Here she is. Be honest with the child. It's okay to say, I'm tired right now. I'm listening to you, but I'm tired. That teaches a child reality. You must listen to your own needs too. In this way, you will also help him learn to listen to his. We need to be okay acknowledging our own emotions. I'll tell you, I've learned this so much with my own son now. If I'm like, oh man, I'm just really tired now. He looks at me like, you're telling me this? They just feel like, oh my gosh, I'm big like you or something. It's just this emotion. So you can share with them. Don't unload on them. Last night, there's shit that happened last night. No. Here's Montessori. I have myself sometimes been too severe with a child. So we all can have our days, right? And those are the two that I wanted to go through. I'm not going to get to this guy because we're not going to have time, but here's a quote from Haim Ginott. I have come to a frightening conclusion. I am the decisive element in the classroom. It is my personal approach that creates the climate. It is my daily mood that makes the weather. As a teacher, I possess tremendous power to make a child's life miserable or joyous. I can be a tool of torture or an instrument of inspiration. I can humiliate or humor, hurt or heal. In all situations, it is my response that decides whether a crisis will be escalated or de-escalated, and a child humanized or dehumanized. So in Montessori, we definitely prepare an environment. And I know we're often told, and I think it's true, that our ideal situation is when we're no longer needed. We're not even in the environment or we'll walk away. But I can tell you our person stays with the child. They absorb how we are as a human being, the relationships we have with them. So we got to be very careful what we're giving the child, right? If you have one of those days where it's just there's too much going on, how many of you take like a chill moment to regroup after a week? Not many, huh? How many of you feel like you need that though? Yeah. So what I would say is start with 15 minutes. Find a spot that's very cool for, like, this was just some cafe that I had found. Like, can you guys do 15 minutes? Yeah? If you can't do 15 minutes, that is the problem, right? So you find a cafe, even you can actually ask somebody, a friend of yours that you respect, to come in and talk to them about the difficult child. See what they throw at you. Here's some of the people that I look to when I don't have a friend in front of me. That's Da Vinci. Every now and then go away, have a little relaxation for when you come back to your work, your judgment will be sure. Have you ever gone and relaxed for a little bit and come back and felt worse? No. That's like that old line about the gym. Have you ever gone to the gym and regretted going to the gym? Never. It never happened. Here's Thomas Edison. I have not failed. I've just found 10,000 ways that won't work. Now, he's talking about the light bulb, but guys, it's really crazy. I've talked to so many different people about, quote, difficult children, and it's amazing that you don't know when the moment's going to be when that, quote, difficult child becomes your favorite child. When sometimes they are your favorite child and they're the difficult child, right? You got to keep at it, keep experimenting, keep trying new things. And the 10,001th time, the child will be yours, in a way. Montessori, progress is not linear. So I think this is a really deep quote of Maria Montessori's, and it's just, I'm curious, how many of you, your life has been like this? Right? It's like this. Hopefully we're going up, but it's like this going up. And that's what she's getting at. And it's the same with the child. If you've been in this game long enough or been in this field, you have experienced a child that you thought was like, oh my, this is a monster. And they come back and visit you 10 years later and they are a gem. I've had the experience. So that's that altitude. We just can't know 100%. We can try different things that we've been talking about throughout this, but we just never know when the change is going to be. So we keep experimenting. The chicken fingers. What's wild about this one is about 10 years later, after we had graduated, everything, my buddy was getting married, and we had this, like, there was a wedding party before or something with like 50 people, and I look over and it's Jason. And he's over there, and I'm like, oh man, I haven't seen this guy in 10 years. And I was thinking to myself, what? Because it wasn't just this one episode, like it had become problematic for everybody. And he walked over to the table and he looks at, hey Jesse, and it was amazing. He looked pretty good too, and I was like, this guy looks good. And he says, I just want to tell you, first thing, I just want to say I'm sorry for kind of all the drama that was going on during college. And then he said that. And then he starts talking about all the cool stuff that he's doing now. And it was really awesome stuff. Like he was coaching a basketball team. And all the upset, not really anger, but all the stuff that I felt about him was just like that, it was gone. Because he apologized and he's up to good stuff, just like that difficult. He's up to good work. He's engaged in good work. And he came up and kind of made recompense, you know? So progress is not linear. It's not linear. I just want you to keep that in mind with the kids. Let me just go here. The one thing I did want to get to you guys is this. So Maria Montessori Speaks to Parents. This book, this is one of those simple books, right? It's got some of her like core stuff, and she's not as flowery as she normally is. She's talking really nicely to parents. Grab that one for the foundational stuff. The prep and the foundational stuff. It's for younger kids, but it can be for everybody. Between parent and child, does everybody know the book, How to Talk So Kids Will Listen and How to Listen So Kids Will Talk? He was their mentor. So we have a lot of people today that are kind of like Instagram stars and so forth, and they're using other people's work and they're just repackaging it. Go to the source. This guy's the source. So some of it's a little dated because he's in the 60s and 70s, but go to that guy. Oh, here. And I'll put it on. Actually, I have a handout for you, okay? If you want to be added to my email list, I have a podcast, and I put one out about once a month. I don't send spam. It's literally only once every month or once every 2 months. And then if you want any info about trying to have me speak at your school or event, you can check that box. Or you'd like to tell me something. I love feedback, positive, negative, whatever. Write it. If you have any question or anything, definitely come up. And you can email me. I think I put my email on there. Oh, I put MontessoriEducation.com, but that's my website. You can just do jesse@MontessoriEducation.com. Oh, and this is just the ending. I want to show you the picture of my son. So my wife had taken this photograph. She comes out and she's like, Jesse, look what Ragnar did. So now he wanted to get even higher. So the stool was no longer enough. So I brought that learning tower that you might have in a kitchen into his room. And we have there's cows outside. Our neighbor has cows wild enough. And he had pushed it. He had gotten off his bed. He had got up and he could just walk over. He pushed it over and he's looking out the window to look at the cows. And I just thought, I went from a troublemaker climbing the dresser to a child who feels free enough that he can move the learning tower on his own, look outside, and see what he wants to see. So find the ways with that difficult child that we can help them to see what they want to see, explore what they want to explore without pushing a girl off a chair or biting their neighbor. So again, there's all sorts of little quick practical things for biting, like carrots, and all sorts of the tricks, you know? So I've got all sorts of tricks, but I think what's really important is these fundamental things for the long range for us. All right, that is it. Yeah, we're good. Cool. Thank you.